Bienvenue.
So welcome to this round table in a room that's completely hidden in the Grand Palais. So bravo to all of you. Congratulations for having found the place. We will be talking about the efficiency measures of next-gen SOC. And we have here 4 specialists who will be able to answer your questions at the end. So I'll let you introduce yourselves. So I am Jean-Nicolas Petrovsky. We edit cybersecurity solutions and we offer SOC managed by our teams. So Mathieu Anost, I am a security manager at Decathlon. And Philippe Monod, I am in charge of the product line of cybersecurity services, which include SOCs and advice at Thales at the international level. And I am Stéphane Darger, and I'm editor-in-chief at INCYBER, which is a media relying on cyber community. So we will start by try to define what is a next-gen SOC, and we'll and see if there is a difference between the efficiency measurement of a regular SOC and a next-gen SOC. Who would like to go first? Mathieu, if I understood well, you used to have a SOC at Decathlon and you have a new one now. Is it a next-gen SOC or not? Mathieu says, I remember when we discussed to prepare the roundtable, we discussed about what is a next-gen SOC. We decided to completely undertake an overhaul of our SOC in order to integrate next-gen tools. We also decided to modernize the entire approach, and we decided to put in a silo what could be put in silo and really automate as much as possible to free the analyst from a workload that up until then was very arduous and manual. So in a few words, how did you go from one to the next? And from a process perspective, what did it look like? Well, we were accompanied by a partner in order to cover a 24-set phase, because Decathlon has activities throughout the world. And then we constructed in parallel a true SOC. We rebuilt a CM in SAS, in SAS. We integrated the XDR directly in this architecture. And we, again, worked on data collection, starting from a white blank page. What are the data that we really need? What data does each tool need in order to function properly? And we built everything in parallel. So at one point, we had 2 CMs that were functioning, one in prod and one in a bubble. And we worked in such manner for a few months in order to have something ready in prod. And so this is really top-notch in terms of automatization and data collection. Pierre, maybe you would like to give your opinion on what is a next-gen SOC, or maybe a previous gen. Yes, indeed, the next-gen term really made me smile, because it's a very much marketing terminology. Beyond the words, what really matters to us is the reactivity, flexibility, agility of a SOC. A SOC needs to reinvent itself, because generation quite bothers me, because it gives this idea of milestones. And we changed our SOC generations, and we had a new vendor in 2020. And this resulted in greater automatization, reactivity. And if there is a gap, we now are able to know if we're vulnerable, what processes protect us, And what really matters is detection. However, it's only 30% of the way, and we need to look at the entire chain. Sometimes there is a divide between the SOC that is often externalized by a partner and what's happening with the internal team. And if we don't have if we don't bridge the two, if we don't have this, if we don't demand responsiveness from both teams, then it doesn't work. So I'd like you to insist a little bit what you mean by permanent modification. Well, it's rather a mindset that we need to have with the partner that makes it possible with the contract you set up. You can have a provision for responsiveness to implement a new rule, so that it doesn't take long when it's needed, and it needs an agility that we cannot find in all partners, unfortunately. So this is very important for us. The link, the mesh of a SOC is really within the hour and not within a week or a month. We are not in a development world. In a pure IT development world where we expect, when we work in stages or cycles, and where we have dev, prod, quality environments. Of course, we take risks in the prod, but we prefer doing so rather than wait for 3 weeks. So it means that for the measurement goals will be evolving, right, and not fixed. Well, then it depends what we define as measurement tools. For me, what's at the heart of a SOC, it's the detection rules and the process. We try not to change it too much because it doesn't only depend on us, but also on others. Jean-Nicolas, do you have a few words? Yes, for me, the next gen, even if it's a marketing word, increasing the detection capacity, we really need to have behavioral detection models. And there is, we know we need to detect, to have higher detection rates and to increase our productivity. And also we need to be able to reduce false positives, and that's one of the main challenges of the SOC for the past 4 or 5 years. So SOAR is a marketing terminology, and it means having an automated response to incidents. We will really have a scoring of detection and not deal with 500 alerts at the same time or threats, but really have them in order of priority in order to address them 2 or 3 at a time. So we have something called SOC fatigue. We analysts, engineers sometimes spend a lot of time dealing with SOCs that are not so interested, and as a result it can go under the radar of detection. And so that's why it's important to bring back to the analyst only what matters. So the way the incidents are dealt with or managed with the SOAR is very important. And we are also having mutualized the cloud SOCs, which are not SOCs in premised. These are SOCs that are on a secured cloud, which makes possible to have better cost and productivity. So last summer, when ministers were under a cyber attack, so we were able to duplicate that across other ministries and to have a very interesting responsiveness. So there are 3 notions really to keep in mind for the new SOCs. Philippe, do you want to say a word? And how do we go from this to measuring the efficiency of the SOC? Yes, just a word to add on what we were discussing about what a new SOC is. I very much agree with Mathieu said. I believe that one of the main issues of the SOCs today is the multiplicity of technologies, of detection technologies and analysis. So we went from an era where detection engines were very much centralized, especially via SIEMs, and now detection is more and more being done within the infrastructure itself. As a result, we have a multiplicity of technology. It's complicated for the analysts because they cannot master everything. They cannot spend their time on every and each technology. So this is a real challenge. The SOAR really is becoming the backbone of the SOC. And as we mentioned, automatization is key in order to manage this explosion of technology. Maybe you can remind us that what Thales is doing, what are the SOCs it's working with. Yes, in a few words, we have today 6 SOCs in the world. The largest one is in France. And we run these 6 SOCs for external clients, not only for Thales. And we have just bought 2 companies, one called S21 based in the Iberia, and another one based in Belgium and Luxembourg. So we will be moving from 6 to about 8 SOCs. So it's quite a few customers. So, and how do you measure the efficiency of these SOCs? So, well, that's what this roundtable is about, isn't it? So we will address it stage by stage. So first we need to distinguish, and it's and I find it quite relevant, at least at the conceptual level. We need to make a distinction between efficiency and effectiveness. Effectiveness is, do we deliver the right tickets, the right within the right time frame? Do we have a low rate of false positives? Do we have a near zero rate of negative rates? And we will also be detailing a few indicators in that regard. And so efficiency is, are we using a lot of energy in order to do that? And by energy, we mean resources such as people, but it can also refer to the set of processes and tools that we implement in order to fulfill the contract. So I think I find it quite relevant to make a distinction between the two, even though it can be blurry. The distinction can be blurry at times. Is it also what you, is it your... So for me, indeed, the coherence of the tools is very important because we have so many data sources we used in building this new SOC. We decided to integrate notions of XDR. It's very, very new. The market is not stable yet, and there can be different definitions depending on the editors. What we see is that with this notion of XDR, the incidents that emerge are already qualified by the editor. And so it's clearly not our job to create detection rules and have SIEMs with thousands of rules. It's really not what we wish, but we delegate this responsibility to editors who often have very well established databases and who work with teams who have the right skills, and this makes it possible to have a lighter SIEM in terms of data. So we need to collect less data, and when you know the price of storage, it's quite advantageous, and it also makes it possible to deal with less detection rules in the SIEMs. And so as a result, the SIEM is an aggregator of security events already qualified. At least that's how we've built it today. So I see you don't quite agree. Well, yes and no. So it's the marketing words. So what really matters is to really gather as many information as much information as possible, as many endpoints as possible. The more information we have, the more we are able to filter it using AI. And the term we will be using doesn't matter really, but what the main challenge is to bring up this information. And sometimes we may generate alerts, and if you invoice per number of alerts or per number of logs, you will have your invoices will triple. So we need to really be coherent. So what we advise is to have a basic pack, such as proxy, firewalls, and we can have a really good detection pack. We need to know that people don't know that 85% of attacks are done with particular something. So we don't need XDR everywhere. And that's what we're saying. The coherence of tools is very important. But we need to have the right architecture for these tools. Yes. And what about the coherence of the engines? Yes, historically, for the past 2 decades, SOC have been existing for a long time, but we had patterns. So we were looking at threats based on detection scenarios, but we cannot detect the new malware or ransomware, who are by definition unknown. This pattern that used to exist is now outdated, and it's outdated if it's used on its own. And now we need to have a correlation engine and to add the straight intelligent, which is the capacity to work with AOCs. So it's also linked to patterns here. But AOC correlation plus UBA, we can see the coherence. UEBA, it's interesting for us in order to do behavioral work. If you have many threats, but you can prioritize them depending on the sensitivities of the users, because you've realized that they have a suspicious behavior, then the analyst will be able to work with the PowerShells that come from abnormal behavior. And as a result, we can anticipate ransomwares and other attacks. Pierre, maybe you would like to tell us a few more words about the global chain and how so we talked a lot about technology, but what really matters for us is the expertise of the person. So we don't really consider ourselves as a collector, aggregator of alerts that have been brought up by various people. We consider ourselves as risk analysts. We know that the first ransomware attacks are often manual intrusion, so it's very important to analyze them. And so this is a collection of low signals, because they are strong enough to hide, since there is a human intelligence behind it. And on a single stage, it's very seldom can we realize when an alert is severe. So analysts need to be very skilled in order to detect those. So this is not easy. This is not a purely technological approach. Hence why it's important, what we said earlier is important, as in releasing the time of the analysts. We mentioned, for example, the importance of automatization. And this is twofold. We can, if there is, wait. So we can add more information on the ticket in order to, in order for the user not to have to do it. And we can also, on the other end, add websites on the blacklist. But the main point is really to free as much time as possible from the analyst in order to let them work on what matters most. So the first tool or the first orientation is linked to time management, right? If I understood well. Are there any other elements? Well, I've realized I didn't really answer your question. So the indicators are not so important for us. Of course, we look at the rate of false positives. And I will, the only real test for us are the pen tests that we will detect. Yes, we'll go back to that topic. But I was thinking that we're measuring the time necessary for the analysis, but I think that the detection time is also important. Can we talk a bit more about these various elements linked to time? I just wanted to emphasize once again on what we just spoke about and what Pierre mentioned on the alert analysis. And for me, this automatization should be in all SOCs, as in we need to match alerts with, on the one hand, CMDB, which is the asset database, in order to improve the IP address, and on the other hand, with the CTI. And so that's really the basic level of how we can improve the automatization process so that the analysts don't have to copy-paste the IP address, put it in a tool, etc., and copy-paste it in the ticket. So that's really a minimum for me. It doesn't really answer the question, but... Okay, but can you tell me a bit more about the time it takes to do so? I will start answering, otherwise we'll never make progress. What's important for me is the time that it takes to detect an alert and the time it takes for an analyst to take it into account. We can have an alert, and if the analyst is overwhelmed by a number of alerts and deal with them one by one, we will have this will affect the response to the response rate to the incident. We need to really qualify the incident. So let's say I've received an alert, I have this information. Is it really something critical or not? And for me, this is one of the most important indicator. How do we qualify the indicator? And then we have other indicators that are more traditional. How long does it take to answer a critical incident? And so for me, all of this is almost not even linked to the quality of a SOC, but these are indicators that have been in existence since the SOCs have been established. So the detection, the time it takes to detect a SOC is important, but it's not the real bottleneck. The real bottleneck is when you detect something really serious in a site, then you would want to isolate it, and then the time it takes to activate the emergency procedures, this is where we need really automatization. And so it's really this that matters, and the entire chain to make the decision and to automatize, this often takes a long time. And that's why, yes, the SOC, but don't only think about SOC in itself. We really need to think about the chain from end to end. And that's what that's the challenge that we have. because we need to, what really costs a lot of time and energy is those other dimensions of the IT work, and unfortunately we cannot automate everything. Yes, indeed. I used to say that 80% of the work of a SOC is organizational work. If you are working with technologies that are the best one in the market, then it's not an issue. Can we measure these organizational aspects? We are the only SOC certified ISO 9001 in France, and so we have indicators linked to that. But also, we have escalation of case. Can a case be treated by the client? And we will need to, of course, work with the IT teams. Do they have the CPU time to deal with those issues? And that's what we are trying to do with the client. We are trying to set up processes that will facilitate this single point of figure, which is the treatment between 80% of the SOCs do not detect new threats, either because they don't have the right technology or they don't have the right process. And so we're really trying to work on that. Process is always important because it's has a human dimension, and that's why we want to certify it. We are trying to conduct stress tests to have feedback from experience, and slowly through technology to respond to this human issue. So technology can only facilitate processes. So we're trying to work on responders and automated remediation. And so we're trying to think, every time I have X critical threat, I will try to, the CM will send to the firewall API a blocker. And this is much easier if it's been established upfront. So technology is not an end to everything, but it really helps mitigate or respond to a human problematic issue.
I wanted to share some slides where I have some measurement items. So could you please further explain what we see on the screen? Because it's related to what we just heard. Well, I'm sorry, because this is a slide made by an engineer with a lot of words and small font text, you know. And we didn't know how big the room would be, so imagine that it would be hard to read. So there are two big columns, efficiency and efficacy. So it's about efficiency and efficacy. Do we use a lot of fuel to reach that goal? Two lines, one for the run and one for the build part. Do we split that? We need to make a really big split in between this. And so the run part, the upper line is about classical indicators. So mid time to detect, NTDD, mid time to analyze and to respond. That's a time for false positive, but also the fact that there's no false negative when with the ticket. That's what's coming out of the SOC, you know. These are just examples. Of course, we can keep adding a series if necessary. That's for the efficiency. Then we have the higher level efficiency. So for the higher level efficiency, we're mostly referring to two main elements. First, the reach of the SOC when it comes to the assets in the company. Do we cover the R&D, finance departments, or a subsidiary and whatever? So what do we cover? What assets do we protect? And the other dimension is what do we cover when it comes to risks or cases of usage? There we could use multi-track types of frameworks to actually determine what is covered. So this is quite interesting. We could make this mapping exercise and say that for MIT we cover X percentage, but only this percentage of the financial department. And when it comes to the R&D, well, they're not well covered. So it gives you a good overview of the level of efficiency of the SOC cover or coverage. Then you have external tests, pen tests, pass, blue team, purple team, red team, you name it. And in addition to this, although it's slightly different, you have the results from the crisis exercises. We need to see what the pen tests can do. We need to have a real crisis exercise and see how we handle the entire process. So we need to check the efficiency of the run. Otherwise, we are dealing with other things. Not a false positive on the ticket, but with the alerts. So internally, you could have a SOC with a lot of alerts, with a lot of load, pointless, useless load. So it's important to make the difference. Then the repetition rate of the false positives, we always have the same false positives. So if we do nothing, if we do not adapt intelligently, then we're wasting time and energy dealing with things which are just repeating. And the success rate and the validation rate, it's the automatic validation rate of the rules. So for all types of automation that was mentioned before. So the costs are in time, you know, when you need to deal with the data treatment. They're reading my slide. I know it's not quite relevant to just read a slide, but on the whole, what I mean is that there are basic stuff and then more complicated ones for this part. When then we had to put it in the CTI database and then try to detect. It's the speed of the chain. It's quite interesting when it comes to the efficiency. Then for the build part, it's slightly different. You have the build time. Some let's say you need to make the build in 6 months or 3 months, whatever. But beyond that, it's an agile mode. It's about efficiency or effectiveness. No, efficiency first. So we start with small perimeter, then the number of standard use cases, and then we adapt on the go. Then the measurements can be different. So we need to see how much time it will take to have the first true real positives, or how much time it will take to trigger a new perimeter, and so on and so on. So you build with more agility. What is the percentage of cases you have in your catalog compared to what will need to be specified for the client, for the specific perimeter you would like to cover, or where you'd like to build something, okay? So here I wanted to show different types of metrics and levels and not just mix everything up. That's the proposal. Mathieu, you wanted the same thing, right? So what are the small indicators? So I remember you spoke about the incidence rates and according to a series of levels, if I remember well. That's right. We're still designing and building the SOC. So we're looking for relevant indicators. We have a hybrid SOC. So we operate part of it and another part is outsourced. So one of our objectives is to do as much detection and autonomy as possible with the partner, handling levels 1 and 2, so that internal teams work on the incident response or improve detection and that part, you know. So the level of autonomy of our partner is very important to us. We want them to cover 90% of incidents, and then only 10% would come to us, and this 10% comes to us because there's a need for further coordination with the internal teams. It's not just about technology we need to dig in, or because it's a critical incident where there could potentially be important decisions to be made with the management team. We need to cut something, you know. So this is an important measure. So when you work with a partner, as we do, so we need to share responsibilities. Pierre, that's for you now. Or two things. First, we spoke about the coverage rate of the SOC. That's true. For Michelin, less than half the incidents come from the SOC. So 60% come from other type of incidents. It doesn't mean that the SOC isn't there, but we're monitoring other things. DNS names that would be stolen from Michelin. This is not a SOC detection, but we still do that. Credential key leaks on the internet and so on. So it's part of what we do. SOC is not just a solution to everything. SOC is not protecting you from everything or against everything. Secondly, we work a lot with our subsidiaries at Group Michelin, and we don't recommend SOC at the beginning. You need some maturity, you know, to use a SOC. Otherwise, you'll have a series of bad practices with a high rate of false positives. So your efforts there to work with the hubs connecting to an admin and so on, this will be blurring the picture for you. So your SOC is going to be pointless. We'll just say that at the IT department you do need to do change management and implement good practices. So we propose to do this before the SOC, before you have a SOC, because it's about saving money. There's no need to pay for a SOC when most of the alerts are false positives and change management takes months. So we tell our subsidiaries that they need to have the CIS maturity curve, and the SOC comes later, at a later stage, stage 2 or 3, once you have the basics, you know, MFAED, technology, and so on. Then good organization, good IT practices. Without that, you don't need a SOC. Don't put a fire alarm, a fire detector, a smoke detector in a house where everybody smokes. You see, that's the same analogy. Then what about communication with the board of management? Maybe it's outside the theme of the day, but in 2014 we started working with the SOC. It was bad. We were among the first ones, I think, in the industry. It didn't detect much, okay? But the comics really liked it. It was on fashion, and the companies on the French Stock Exchange needed one. And it was like the flagship that enabled us to start the safety work and say that safety is important. Then, okay, let's create a cert, but the cert is only in France. Okay, we are different countries, so let's create antenna in China, the US, and so on. So this dynamism comes from the SOC, which was like the flagship. I said this is the visible part of the iceberg, which pushed everybody forward. But the security ecosystem at Michelin goes beyond the SOC. But the SOC was at the engine. It was like a symbol. It wasn't very useful at the beginning, but it enabled us to develop the rest. So it's important. When you do security, you need to do good management. You know, you need to raise awareness about this and raise the awareness of the management teams. Okay, thank you. There's another measurement tool, red teaming. Yeah, the measurement tool first. In the slides we proposed to the board of management, we shared with them a new indicator saying that there are attacks or malware that we could have avoided, and it's well understood. Okay, these are the most obvious attacks, and then we show the cost it could have. It's very subjective. Of course, it's hard to make an assessment, but we use external audits and studies, but clients like that because they can feedback to their management. Say, look, we have a SOC which is efficient, it's doing the job, it has a ROI, but thanks to the SOC, we avoid facing ransomware. We avoid a certain level of risk, and there's a certain level of cost. It's quite subjective, we agree, but it's well seen, perceived by the general managers because they like the wording, the vocabulary we use. We say you have avoided losing data, you have avoided spending money, you have avoided spending 10 times of data. One data is 1.5 million euros of losses. So times 10, that's 15 million or something. That's according to IBM study. They like it a lot on the board of management. Now back to the good practices. It's very interesting. I disagree with this, but the SOC is essential for the compliance to protect against attacks. Back to the metrics, a good SOC is a SOC that protects a company. It means that the company was not attacked. So the main indicator is that I didn't have any successful attack in the last 12 months because of the SOC. When 50% of the threats or the problems we have with the SOC, or 50% mostly come from bad practice. That's what's interesting. We need to use, and Monique used the password of Robert. She should not have done that. And we need to have a continuous improvement process and say, look, at the term management, do you agree that Monique does this or that? No, we disagree. So let's have a process, let's check, and let's check the track every month that they are improving the practice. So the SOC is mature after 6 months, but you install it in 1 day. Otherwise, it's an old generation. So we install it in 1 day, it's up and running. But for 6 months, we have bad practices. So we'll detect the flow using a technical login that was created 20 years ago that's still there, and they're putting pressure on the server and increasing the lag and response time. It's not cybersecurity, true, but these processes can lead to an attack. Because if a process started 20 years ago, it's not been updated and it's still the same password as 20 years ago, and if it's still used by, it could be used by a hacker to connect on a server, that's a security breach. This is where you'll get the malware and lose the data. So it's all about good practice, and it takes around 6 months to reach the right level of maturity with a SOC, but then you'll be working on the true attacks. But these 6 months are super important because it allows us to clean up the system, have good health, cyber security health and hygiene if you want. So it's about the indicators that the management didn't know. So they learn about this, and they learn that it's not just about cyber security, it's about behaviors. And after that, we have a better rate of detection, CTIs, customization, you name it. And so we can detect, as an insider, you can detect the important threat, you see. But on the contrary, I think we have to use a SOC from scratch. That's what you said, Philippe, right? In a mature organization, the efficiency of a SOC doesn't seem to go down at one time. Well, this is something we've debated. So we could say that the more protection you provide, the less you need, or the less you'll detect things. Where that's not false, you know. That's somehow true. That's the purpose of the game, right? Correct. But there's an important loop that we need to reckon with. That's the continuous improvement loop. So it means that every time you detect something, you can improve the protection level, can reinforce protection. And also we see that organizations change a lot, always have a new scope, new IT projects and so on. So the level of protection and detection always has to adapt. In other words, we have to evolve detection level, SOC, incident response. It's a living system, you know. I simply wanted to add one thing. It's about incident management, and it's good to speak about other things. For me, the SOC is like the weapon of security. They collect the data. They have the SOC has a vision of what's going on, and we work a lot on compliance. So it's not about protection. It's not about incident response, but it's about finding indicators and working with the team on compliance rates when needed. So all these actions, we could say, are prohibited. So we come up there with our work and our data, and with the data we're able to give you a compliance rate per team, per country, per whatever. This is some kind of feedback we can send to the board of management, and it's useful for them. Well, you see that the efficiency of the SOC doesn't only depend on the SOC. Well, it's not just a SOC with incident response. It's about something else, and the definition of SOC can change from a company to another according to your expectations. Now, I think it goes way beyond mere incidentology, as I would dare say. Pierre, what about you? What about the measurement tools? We think this is the ultimate measurement tool. Now, we're not going to simulate a red team, but a purple team. So we have testers in the team, and they will make a simulation. Well, not just a simulation, they will go through 60 steps of the security chain. And in full transparency, there's the security team. So they say, look, we'll carry out this action. What do you see? Do you see it? Do you not see it? Is it logged in or not? Is there an alert or not? And it's good. If we agree on what we want to test, well, it's about detection of exfiltration, OPT, ransomware, whatever. Mimikatz. Well, this is something we're gonna test. So we'll test out the 50 shades of purple, and so with the official Mimikatz, we have the protect layer that should block that. So we need to recompile this and see how this works. Then you see, you try different techniques to well, imagine the different types of attacks with different levels of attacks. So we'll be dividing this, and it's very useful because generally speaking, human intelligence remains on top of the detection levels. When a tester knows what type of detection there was, you can still go around. So we don't do that every day. It takes 3 days, of course, to run a full test. But it's a good refresher, you know, according to what we know exists. Then it allows us to ask ourselves the right questions. And well, we need to remain quite humble, you know, when you have a SOC and you need to test it out. So it's a lot of added value for us. I'd like to bounce back on this. The red team is, we got the pros and the cons. It gives you a lot of feedback, but in our case, we're present in 40 countries, and some countries just say that they will test. If 40 countries start testing at the same time, it's too much. So it's about good governance. It's about good organization of those tests. Because if every week we have a new country, a new scope or perimeter that wants to test, or the team are not facing incidents, they're just facing tests. The same for us, we spoke about fatigue before. Well, it's not always relevant to have many tests. It's always about organization and so on. We need to give them enough margin for maneuver to test things out. They need to make tests, of course, but we need to see how the SOC and the SOC team are integrated in this to make sure they're not flooded with alerts. Because then they say, okay, this is that country making more tests. Well, it seems so obvious, but of course, the people who can do the pen tests on red teams, we only have two people. Two types of people, search and audit. But otherwise it's prohibited. Any IT entity cannot do pen testing. Philip, any reaction? Yeah, we do a lot, and I agree that it's very useful. Now to start a debate here, but I'd like to say that we need some nuance. You know, pen testers are using their own procedures and so on. Of course, they're developing a lot of procedures, but to the caricature, you know, thieves could enter through the window, but once you have secured the window, they could come in through some other place, the door or the chimney. See, that's the weakness with the pen tester. The pen tester will not be able to cover all possibilities where attackers could strike. So this is the true limitation of the exercise. So maybe we can fix the problems one after the other, but you know, bad people are creative and they can look for another way to attack. All right. So the checking process is very important because we have a quality process with a continuous migration process, and so we need to be able to use what we learn from the checks and implement and improve. We have 5 levels of testing. First is the customer level. That's the customer telling us, not telling us that they're testing. Then engineers who are interns and they're testing. So we are tested every day. Because if the client tells us that there's an intern, making a test that we couldn't see, that means we're not good. Then we have vulnerability scans to detect a vulnerability upstream. This is what we add to the SOCs to do prevention work. Then you have full log generation. So these are false log tests to make sure the process is well respected. It's about incident treatment. So we have a fake log and we say, okay, you need to call this number if you see this log. And then if we have quality indicators, then what else? The red teams, of course, with clients who make regular audits, and then the creation of some malware. We have that in the catalog and we inject it on a limited scope to make sure it can be detected. And this is not about red team attacks with human processes, but something unknown. So this is interesting, but it's for companies like Thales, which can create malware exe, without a manual hand. Then you have the warnings, different warnings, but the EDR antivirus tools will actually recognize you, and you cannot use your malware for other clients, of course. But this is ISO 9001, and we have to follow rules. We created them actually to have the right level of quality. One last question before we start the Q&A session. There was a lot of talk about analysts and the work they do. So there is a high turnover in analysts in some places. Is it the marker of this SOC efficiency? I don't know if it is an indicator of the SOC's quality, but of its efficiency, it is, yes. The more relevant the SOC, the better the added value, and the more people want to stay around. Now, customer client, I believe that the most important item is with the SOC is the skills of the analysts. If you want to hire skilled people, and if you do level 1 all the time, they will just go away. As a client, it's not our problem, but I understand that the SOC companies have to reinvent the profession of a E3 analyst. Automation is a good way to go. So we get them rid of some lower tasks, and they will just focus on what is valuable. And what we do recommend and what we like to see is that analysts rotate. They just look the other way. They should do pen tests and other activities to take them out of their routine, 1 week, a month or something. Then it improves quality with people who are motivated. I fully agree. I wanted to organize a tournament here, but no. Yeah, human matters are at the heart of SOCs. If you have level 2, level 3 analysts who actually keep working on this and do the same things, it's not going to work well and you have problems. So it is essential that we can strike the right balance and set the right priorities. You always have to find your own priorities and then make sure you can assess your new technology, assess a process, get off the usual framework you're in. See new things. It's important. We fully agree on that. Okay, let's make it short. I do not agree. Let's imagine you're an analyst doing this 200 days a year. You get fed up after a year. Level 1 analysts, you cannot keep them over 1.5 years. Some classes say, well, keep him. No, the guy is good. So it goes level 2, level 3, but never remains as an analyst, or is not good, no pay increase, and then he's hunted by another company and gets more money somewhere else. So it's not true. I didn't speak about level 1s. It's a new concept. No level 1. It's all automated. That's one solution, okay. So it's hard to cut a long story short here, but the good people, they want to get up the corporate ladder. They want to learn new things. What is at stake here is the level 1. We need to process as much as possible to be fully independent from the turnover issues. That is what's at stake, and some clients do not understand that. They said you should have paid him more to keep him. That's not their problem, actually. The problem is the guy needs to do other things. Are there questions in the room? Otherwise, we'll be sent away. Yep.
Hello, I'm Henri Condron from the CUSIF. During the roundtable, we talked a lot about incident detection. There is another stage that's very important is the incident response. As we said, incidents start with user action that jeopardized the IT system. When we talk about incident response, when we are in an international structure such as a subsidiary, how do we ensure the speed of the response when we work in a decentralized structure? I don't know if I have the right answer. I can share about how it works for us. We are in a structure that's quite centralized security-wise. We're based in France, and we are based on local relays who will help us with translation, go to the office, etc. So it's a mesh. It's a network that's created within the company in order to have relays as close as possible to our customers. This is how we work. And also there are two aspects for us. Similarly to Decathlon, we have a very deep network on site, but often most of the IT security problems are linked to the central system. And for that, we need to identify the cell within the team who will be in charge of dealing with these issues, and we need to know each other. And when we have a security issue, we share it with them. And we need really to collaborate, because on our own we cannot recreate this network within the IT in order to fix everything quickly. For us, the key is that we build on an existing organizational structure that deals with IT security. And maybe one last question. So the first question I have is about measurement. How can we measure the MTTD, the real MTTD? Not only from the event to the observation, but from the intrusion of the attack. That was the first question. And the second question is how the indicators that we see, how can we see them on the SOC components? For example, how the people process product components, how do we measure those, and can we do it in a multidimensional way? So following an incident, we can maybe say if I didn't have the process, I would have been late, etc. And that's what we do when we have feedback from experience. And we share about what incidents should have been better detected, etc. Often the customer is very much involved, and it's about whether they responded in time, and we always reflect on how can we continuously improve. I don't have a real indicator in that regard, and it's our indicators are similar to the ones Thales presented, and we need to automatize these indicators, and it's more complicated. So this is what we do in the steering committee, and I realized in that discussion that you may come out of this meeting thinking a SOC is complicated, but really it's not. Everything is automated. You can improve your security levels. You have very powerful indicators. It's really not that complicated. We should be wary of not complexifying too much. But of course, we are always trying to improve ourselves. But it's really simple. Yes, and to bring an additional response, we often measure the MTTD from the event to the moment that the ticket has been generated. But in reality, it's very quick because everything is automated, and unless you have an issue on the production chain. But I do agree with you that what's more relevant is when the ticket has been really been analyzed with the right level of rigor. And this really matters most when we need human analysis in order to have a high quality work. Something also that hasn't been addressed, we of course try to analyze in a systematic way all the false negatives, everything that should have been detected and that hasn't been. But another question is, have we detected that sufficiently early enough in the kill chain? Because sometimes we're happy to have detected something, but really it should have been done much earlier. And we really need to systematically carry out this analysis in order to improve both protection and analysis. Is very important. Thank you. You will be finding some of this information in previous issues of INCYBER that discuss exactly these points. If you want to see the previous issues, you go on INCYBER and you enter your email address, and in that email that will be sent to you with the latest issue, you will be able to find the previous ones. That's it. Many thanks for your participation.